So we have our flow hooked up where every single update, it will check on whether or not you're pushing the button, the jump button down. The data from that is being passed to the if statement. And if it is true, it's going to follow this path. If it is false, then it's going to follow this path. Well, let's think about what we want to do. If I'm pushing the jump button down, then I would like the player to jump. Go up like this. Now, there's many ways to do this type of logic. For us, what I'm going to use is Unity's built-in physics system. So remember that my player game object here has both a rigid body as well as a box collider. A box collider in Unity denotes the shape of this object, whereas the rigid body on this denotes sort of all the other physical properties and sort of the simulation behind the physics system. So in this case, the next thing I'm going to do is I want to apply some force on this object. I'm going to apply an upward force, which causes this jump motion to happen. And I want that upward force to be applied only if you're pushing the jump button down. So if this is true, then I would like to add force. So let's go and take a look at what we have for units here. I'm just going to search for the word force and see what happens. We've got constant force, force mode, literal, LD group, rigid body add force. That sounds like what I want. And definitely encouraged to sort of just search for the various things that you're thinking you might need in order to find what you might want. So here we go. Let's try using this one, rigid body add force. Okay, this one looks pretty complex. Fortunately, one of the things that the visual scripting language provides us is if I have one of these units selected, up here on the top left, I can look at all of the inputs and outputs and a little bit more documentation. So this tells me that this very first input here is the flow input, and it says this is the entry point, right? Like, which is pretty common for all of them, right? It's when this gets executed. The next thing is the target, right? So the target is what should have this force applied to it. The next field down here called force, this is the force vector in world coordinates. So the direction represented as X, Y, Z according to the unit space of the world, right? It's essentially this up here, right? This is the units of the world. I'm spinning it around it now. If you look at this little gizmo up here, units of the world, right? Or this one here. So what we want is some force being applied in the upward direction, which is this green arrow, which is my Y direction. I'm going to go ahead and enter, I don't know, 250 for that. 0 in the X, 250 in the Y, and 0 in the Z. The last entry is this mode force, which is the type of force to apply. I can see force, acceleration, impulse, and velocity change. Let's go ahead and set that to impulse and see what happens. So then when do I want this to execute? I want this to execute only if this evaluates to true. Cool. Let's take a look at this again. Every update, check the button down, check for jump, pass that along to this if statement. If it is true, meaning I'm pushing the button, then I'm going to add force to the rigid body. Let's go back here and hit play and see what happens. Notice how when I hit play, and if I keep this graph open, I can see that there's this flow happening, right? So I know that it's hitting this update, it's doing this get button down logic, and it's hitting this if statement, but it's not doing this add force. It's because I'm not pushing the button. So I'm going to go ahead and push the button now, and we will see what happens. I rocketed off into space. Let's try that again. So I'm going to reduce this down. Let's try 50. All right. And I've hit space. Okay, that's still quite a bit. But notice how I can change this at runtime, right? I can drop this down if I want. I can also, whenever I hit space, there we go. Whenever I hit space, you can see that this add force sort of lights up. It's because it's telling me that it's being fired off one time. It's executing one time, right? So whenever I hit the space bar, it's going to execute this over and over and over again, right? It's going to check, am I pushing the button? And if I am, then apply this force to the player. Excellent. This is most of what I need to do to get my player to jump without writing any logic at all in any sort of programming language.